Welcome, everybody, for this week's Pluralia Dialogos, where I'm very happy to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel retired Karen Kwiatkowski. Karen, thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights. I've got a lot of questions I'm going to throw at you, but how are you feeling right now? I mean, 2026 has just begun. How do you feel?
Oh my gosh, I'm pretty concerned about the accelerating decline of the U.S. empire because I'm in America. I'm an American. And so I don't know. Blowback is real, and it's, a lot of things that I don't think many Americans are really prepared for. I don't think the way Americans see our country is anywhere close to the way the rest of the world sees it. We have our issues, obviously, and I think half the country is unhappy with Trump, at least half the country, and they think it's a right-left thing, but really it's much more than that. And I don't think a lot of Americans really get it.
Yeah. And I just noticed here we've got Jackson Hinkle, who just entered the stage. I'm going to bring him on here. Jackson.
Hi.
Hello, Jackson Hinkle. All right, with legitimate targets. Thank you so much for joining us. I opened up with Karen with a very, very broad question. Just basically ask her, how does she feel? Karen made the point that a lot of Americans haven't really thought through the consequences of what we're actually living into right now, and tend to get stuck into this binary of left-right narratives that are all ultimately a bit of a trap, because our problems are much more than any left-right consideration can go. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this whole question of like the degree to which Americans right now are out of reality, out of touch with the consequences of what they're facing based on this left-right question, or is there some validity to the left-right fight? As I know some people right now think that, I could be wrong. Maybe the left-right thing actually has some merit. What do you think about that whole question?
Well, thanks for having me on, and it's great to be here. I think it has no validity whatsoever. They've got us focused on that and on other minutia, the culture wars and whatnot. But as President Putin pointed out, as kidnapped President Maduro pointed out, the West is run by a group of, satanic PDF files. We'll say it like that, not to get censored if this is going to be published on these censorious platforms. But, that's the truth of the matter. And I think these files that have been released have shown that they view it as one big game. And really, I think the most interesting part that we've seen in these files is you see that they're very confident to discuss matters of horrific nature, the most horrific things that you could ever imagine. All these deviances on email. And then as soon as someone brought up the prospect of, how can we take out Assad, or, how can we manufacture a coup in Russia against Putin? And this was when Putin was far more, lenient towards Western powers and conciliatory toward them. Epstein would immediately say, like, that's not a conversation for email. We should probably speak over the phone for that. So that's what they view as the real, meat and potatoes, the real power struggle. They view that as the serious matter, not any of the extremely illegal, sexual deviances that they were putting forward.
Yeah, that caught me too. And on that issue, 3,000, Epstein files released all at a very peculiar moment. There seems to be a perfect storm emerging. You've got an economic, a very clear signs of economic disintegration entering a new phase. You've got storms brewing in the Middle East. The Iranian media is freaked out, and rightfully so, about the high level possibility of a strike on Iran. Even Vucic has even come out last night or this morning saying that it is likely that within the next 48 hours we could see a U.S. strike on Iran. There's so many different things going on, but then these 3,000 files drop as well. Is this a distraction, Karen, or do you think that this is maybe perhaps somebody trying to throw a wrench into the gears of war, or is this something else, a bit of a mind screwery operation going on?
Yeah, 3 million, I think it is.
3 million, 3,000.
And I think that's a lot of files to go through. Jackson's gone through a number of them and pointed out, that people are seeing what they can see there, but I think the volume is, of course, they're under pressure to do it legally. But I think it is a big distraction from what this Iran war, if they're going to get one, is going to turn into, because what it's going to turn into is losses for the Americans. I mean, the Iranians are not playing when they tell you their capabilities. We know their capabilities. We've watched their capabilities. The 12-day war wasn't a 30-day war for a reason, because their capabilities are massive and they will destroy Israel for sure, which of course is to destroy the United States. I mean, the United States government, because we are an Israeli occupied territory in Washington. There's no doubt about that. So there's a lot at risk with this brinksmanship that Trump is playing in particular. Also, our economy is not recovering, contrary to, the high inflated stock market and all these other things. The wealth is concentrated at the top. The people, the 85% below, maybe 90%, these people are struggling to pay their bills. They're leveraged with credit cards and everything else just to kind of make it through the next month. So when oil and gas prices are disrupted by what happens in the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's going to be really ugly. So I don't think they want Americans looking at this, because an average American and even a policymaker in Washington would, if they were smart, they would be advising Trump, do not do this. Stop.
Yeah.
And Trump's like, oh, we're talking to the Iranians. Is that a ploy? Who talks to Trump? Trump lies. I mean, he is known for attacking in the middle of diplomatic engagement, specifically with Iran. But this is his policy. Yeah, we're talking, it's all good. And then all of a sudden, boom. But this time the boom is going to go back on us. It's going to be extremely painful. So I think they want Americans distracted to some extent until they figure out what they're going to do in Iran. And I don't know. I mean, how will Americans take it if Americans are killed by, we have basically 150,000, 200,000 Americans within reach of missile attack. And Israel is demanding that we do this, because they say we can't, it's not a nuclear threat that Iran poses, it's a ballistic missile threat. So America, you must take out all their ballistic missiles. I mean, what kind of insanity is that? So I think Epstein fits in to kind of distract Americans from asking those hard questions.
Well, Jackson, on that issue, I mean, right now, Iran's a much bigger machinery than anything we've taken out. The U.S. military-industrial complex has taken out over the past decades and decades. I mean, we've got an alliance as well with Russia, with China, with long 20 to 25-year strategic agreements. I'm not sure if any of that is. There's a certain opacity regarding to what degree China or Russia would support Iran militarily and what that would entail. We know that there's a certain degree of logistical support that Russia has certainly provided to Iran. But I mean, it seems like, again, there's an armada, the SS Lincoln strike group, the aircraft carrier is in position. As Karen alluded to, the Straits of Hormuz could easily get shut down by Iran. God knows what consequences that would have. What do you think right now? Do you think that Russia and China would step in militarily to support Iran in such a situation, or what do you think is going on there?
Well, there are a few interesting developments we've seen over the past 48 hours. It was reported initially by Al Jazeera that Russia and China were going to do joint naval drills with the Iranian Navy and the IRGC Navy. And they said they were going to do it within the next few days. That was the report. It came to be after the leader of the Iranian National Security Council went to Moscow. Fars News came out and said, yes, it's going to happen, but it's going to happen 3 weeks from today, which begs the question, are they expecting that war is not going to break out within the next 3 weeks? Also, Netanyahu said that he is planning a visit to Washington, D.C. sometime next month. Well, now we are in the month. It's the 1st of February. So when is that going to take place? Again, as you pointed out, is this a psyop? Oh, yeah, we'll negotiate. Oh, yeah, Netanyahu's coming to D.C. Make it look like nothing's going to happen, and then something happens. But I really have no idea. No one has any idea. What we do know for certain is that the U.S. has amassed 2 carrier strike groups. They sent another destroyer there this week from Greece. It was stationed, and it has anti-missile defense systems on board. It's got they've got likely some sort of special operations in Azerbaijan. People are saying maybe Delta Force. There were reports that Delta Force was going to get repositioned out to some country in the Middle East, and the plane that carries them landed in Azerbaijan a few days ago. At the same time, you have dozens of these Russian Ilyushin 76 cargo jets, which have been landing in Iran over the past few weeks and months. Even over the past 24 hours, there was 4 cargo jets. We also have seen Belarusian cargo jets. And yesterday, there was an Iranian cargo jet, which took off from Urumqi in China and came back to Iran. So everyone is stacking up. Everyone knows that a war is going to happen. I guess it's just a matter of when, and there is no way whatsoever of knowing when that's going to be.
Well, yeah, on that note, it seems like we can only at best triangulate and speculate on what's going on behind the scenes, because I'm sure there is undoubtedly a lot. We have certain signs. There's a meeting happening later on today in Abu Dhabi, a tripartite meeting that's dealing with the U.S., Russia, Ukraine situation, but probably a lot more beyond that. Undoubtedly, these questions are being brought into that conversation as well. Now, I know Kirill Dmitriev has been putting out positive signals, positive messaging. He just had meetings with his counterparts in Florida in preparation for that Abu Dhabi meeting. They're also making the point that Peskov has made the point that the details of what is this Anchorage formula have to remain secret. That we can't just go talk about what we've agreed upon in Anchorage months ago. Do you think that there are any possible off-ramps that are being negotiated by the U.S. and the Russians right now to sort of avoid this oncoming calamity? Because, I mean, the amount of potential that'll be destroyed if this is permitted to turn into a hot war, it's mind-boggling. And I'd like to think that there's some people who are in the room capable of having a conversation that can avoid potentially a dark age. But what do you think, Aaron, is going to be some of the topics that will be fleshed out at today in Abu Dhabi between the U.S. and the Russians?
Are you asking me to?
I'm asking you. What do you think? Yeah. Do you have any?
I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Abu Dhabi right now. I mean, I wouldn't want to go there. It's like, to me, it's dangerous. So maybe putting leadership there is a way to prevent, it happening while they're there, or a ploy, a decoy kind of thing like we've done in the past. But, I do notice that a lot of the Putin in particular, but the Russian negotiators, and also, even to some extent, China, they're not happy with Trump. I mean, Trump is insane in so many ways, but they're all very polite to him. And everybody who works with Trump and domestically and around the world, they know he likes flattery. He wants to be respected. He wants to be seen as great in every positive connotation of what great is. He wants that. And so they feed him that. They work him that way, which it seems effective. I mean, this is what who was the guy, the former CIA director who's Israel First, Pompeo. When Pompeo worked in the first administration, he was the biggest suck up they had in the administration, and Pompeo hated him the worst, despised him the worst, and really broke those ties when he wrote his book and said all these nasty things about Trump, which I'm sure, he believed those all along. But the people around them in that administration, in the first Trump administration, felt that Pompeo was such a blatant suck up, such a blatant flatterer of Trump. It was so obvious, but it wasn't obvious to Trump. I mean, if it was obvious, it still worked. So I see Trump being treated by the other leaders of the world that matter in a way that's abnormally respectful. It's not how. So I don't know if they mean it or they're playing him. I don't know, but Trump is dangerous because he doesn't have a clear, he never served in the military. He thinks our military is so capable. And he has various examples that he gives, like the grab and snatch of Maduro. Okay, that was completely a CIA greased operation. If we had gone in there with opposition, we very well could have had 1979 in the desert under Carter when they tried to rescue the hostages. Very, very similar possibilities exist. Trump thinks we have the greatest Pentagon, and yet he has to increase their budget to 1.5 trillion. Why is that? With no audit, with no real examination of what's wrong in the Pentagon, he's willing to throw. That's because I think he understands, maybe very superficially, that Pentagon is not that capable. And so when you're going to go out and test it, which I don't think Maduro's snatch and grab was a testing at all, but it'll be tested if he does this thing in with Iran. If he decides to go in with Iran, where Iran has had time to not just prepare, but to study our tactics, to study Israeli capabilities and tactics, to understand the relationships that we have. Iran knows all that. They're totally prepared in a way that we are not prepared. So the question is, how much does Trump believe that isn't true? Does he think this will be a cakewalk? I mean, they tell him this all the time. It doesn't matter what war it is, it's going to be a cakewalk. But what does Trump believe? I don't think he's capable of really discerning, the problems that he will face. So that's why I can't predict what he's going to do, because I don't know what's going on in his head. And of course, his head is his own morals, right? That's the only thing that really restrains Trump is his, my own mind, he says.
That is sort of, I guess, a difficult thing for analysts like yourselves and like so many out there, is that we tend to use logic to try to make sense of the world. But it does seem like there's a certain degree of irrationalism, at least it appears to be. There's a certain degree of irrationalism in play. Jax, you mentioned that there's a below the typical geopolitical conversation, there is sort of like a signs of a bubbling fanatical Satanism under the surface, a certain religiosity, a very bad, dark religiosity that causes people to do things that don't seem to conform to our typical idea of what self-interest is. Israel doesn't seem, despite the vast influence that the Zionists have over the U.S. foreign policy, it doesn't seem like either the U.S. or Israel would benefit by such a strike, an accelerated strike onto Iran. If anything, it seems to me that it would be very decapitating to especially Israel, that's living right there in a core hotspot, unless they have maybe some secret agreement with other, Arab states, maybe certain groupings inside of Saudi Arabia or UAE, maybe have some agreement to help out in secret. I don't know. Currently, of course, if Saudi Arabia or others say that they're not going to collaborate, or they're going to maybe help out, help prevent a strike on Iran, that would result in one thing. But if they've got a secret agreement to help out with the U.S. Israeli side, maybe that would turn things in a darker path. But it doesn't seem like either way anything would benefit Israel or the U.S. What do you think is really pushing things? Do you think that they have more, that the Israelis and the U.S. have more capabilities to carry out such a strike, or are they delusional and operating on this realm of absurdity that and I guess Karen's kind of concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's the latter. If you look at the whole worldview of Zionists, it's the principle that there's always another enemy, and that is how they justify, in effect, their continued existence and the bankrolling and all the support that they get from all across the world. And, it's the same thing to be said, I guess, about the ADL in the United States. It's just the constant fear mongering that someone is always out to get a certain group, even if it might not be true. So that's kind of like what we see in Israel as a country, as it deals with its neighbors. If it's not Iran, it's going to be Turkey. If it's not Turkey, it's going to be nuclear Pakistan. The list will just keep growing and growing, or Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia this week, the defense minister met with Lindsey Graham, and Khalid bin Salman, I think is his name, KBS. And he also was meeting with a bunch of U.S. officials, and they were saying, allegedly, according to Axios in these meetings, that they actually do support now, strikes against Iran. They're saying you're going to embolden the Iranian regime if you don't do strikes now, if you don't put them in their place. And for the past several months, Saudi Arabia has been saying a lot of nice things, saying, we need to work with Turkey and Pakistan and Qatar, and, they're diplomatically providing cover for the Iranians at the same time. As soon as they got those PAC ones. They got a big weapon shipment into Saudi Arabia, though. They changed their tune. But I don't think Saudi Arabia really cares all that much, because in the same way that I'm sure a lot of Saudis view Iran as an enemy and a threat, also they view Israel the same way, which is not necessarily a good thing that they view Iran and Israel in the same way. But it shows where I think their thinking is at. And a lot of these geopolitical conflicts in either the Horn of Africa, Northern Africa, or in the Middle East, you see that it's Saudi Arabia and Turkey, or just Saudi Arabia, versus proxies backed by the UAE and Israel. So there's a real dilemma there for the Saudis. And maybe they view this as just what you said, an illogical push that is only going to respond or will inevitably respond in one thing. The lowest tier response that we'll probably get if there are strikes on Iran is going to be strikes on Israel. That's another enemy for Saudi Arabia. So there you go. Why wouldn't they back that? I guess they feel confident in Iran's capabilities. And I think that's what we need to remember is strikes on Israel. They've already been done before. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit, with the exception of if there's a maritime blockade. If there's a maritime blockade, then running the blockade, I guess, would be the low-hanging fruit. But we'll see what happens. I do think the switch up with Saudi Arabia is interesting. They seem to be the only, very, I guess, cunning and maybe not moral, but they're logical, and why they would support that. What Israel's doing and the U.S. is doing, it's not logical at all.
Mm-hmm. I've got so there over an 8-day period from on January 22nd, you had Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the so Mahmoud Abbas presented himself in Moscow, met with high-level officials. I think he met with Putin. That was January 22nd. Not too many details of the meeting came public, but 5 days later, you had Giuliani brought in to Moscow. Didn't look great, but got to do what you got to do in the real politic world and talk to people who are officially heads of state. But he showed up in Moscow, had a meeting, seemed to have gone well. Then you had the UAE president Nahyan also show up the next day, meeting in Moscow, followed up by Ali Larijani, the head of the Supreme Council, Security Council of Iran, also meet up in with high level officials. I'm not sure if he met up with Putin, but I think so. Now that's a lot of high level Arab and Persian leaders coming and meeting in Moscow. Some people say that this is a bad thing. Other people say that this is a good thing, or signs that things are boding well, that maybe things are being agreed upon. Ali Larijani gave an official statement saying that the media is creating an artificial war narrative, but actually a structured framework for negotiations is taking shape between Iran and certain hostile forces. What do you think, Karen? Are you feeling like all of these meetings are connected? Are they part of what Ali Larijani is referring to, or is he kind of projecting a hope that maybe is not so well founded, and maybe he's underestimating what he's up against?
Well, everything's connected, and talking is always good. That's awareness, that's communication, agreements even between these countries. But I think, nobody else's money is collapsing except our money, right? Well, maybe Zimbabwe's is recovering, and maybe Nicaragua's or Venezuela's money is maybe going to recover. But for the most part, for a major nation, like the rest of them, even China's one, they have a system which is keeping their money okay, keeping it positive. We have no system like that. We print, we create, we spend, we take, we steal, we make war, which of course is very destructive economically. Not just for the people that are on the receiving end of our military capability, but the fact that this is a lot of money going into something that is made to be destroyed. It doesn't accomplish anything. The military industrial complex, which is the bulk of our export economy, really. Minus a few commodities, that's what we export. So our money's in trouble. So if you are looking at the United States and Israel, which is highly dependent on certainly the Western financial system and to a great deal the U.S. financial system, if you look at us, if we can't change this trajectory of what is happening to our dollar, then we go down. Okay, this is kind of the the existential threat to the American empire is when our money is no longer attractive, and it's no longer attractive. It's an empty, hollow shell of money. The world knows it, and everybody from American investors to global investors are looking for alternatives and have been for years. So that's happening, and that's not going to change. All that's going to do with the war with Iran is going to accelerate it. So what is the U.S. trying to accomplish? We have great risks that people need to recognize. Financial risk. Our country is bankrupt. So that's a bad thing, because what does war do? Well, we know what war does in a state construct. It allows total control domestically, which we're almost there. I mean, look at ICE. I mean, federal police doing whatever they want, unconstitutionally, unrestrained by law. That's like a demonstration of what is possible in terms of controlling the increasingly impoverished American public. War allows that. War allows that to happen with patriotic support by the people, even a divided people. Divided people are united when they feel that this, I don't care what country it is, when they're attacked, when they engage in war, people are very susceptible to patriotic narratives. So does America need a war, even if it sacrifices Israel? I mean, or damages it? Israel has nuclear weapons. So that kind of thing can make war last a long time, at least in their minds. We have how many decades has it been since the United States has decided you can fight a nuclear war? You can go one or two shots with a nuclear weapon, then somehow it will come under control and we will go forward. That is part of American military doctrine. They understand or they don't understand it. They believe that's possible. So I see war very much in America's interest, even if it sacrifices Israel. And this goes to the debate of, does Israel run Washington or does Washington run Israel? I don't know, but our dollar needs a war, because the alternative is for us to really, as an empire, collapse as an empire and become probably a broken up republic of some sort, with a new issuance of money, new currency, new system. So they don't want that. Powers that be do not want that. And war looks attractive when you're dealing with this. And so the rest of the world is not sitting in our shoes. And they go, well, war is damaging. War will cause major problems for everybody. Yeah, it will. But it might extend the life of the dollar. And I think that I think the people making the decisions here are willing to risk that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that I guess for me is also very concerning, is that and also confusing a little bit, because in the past, it seems like there was this idea of a threat from, Islamo-fascist nations that did our 9/11. They're attacking us. There's this idea that we have the higher moral ground because of whatever false flag you can name is causing us to go and strike back against our enemies who want to hurt us. Whereas in the case of Iran, I don't see, at least, maybe it's because I'm Canadian, but I don't see a giant amount of support, even amongst most typical Republicans. Of course, you have the Lindsey Grahams out there, you got the Rubios and everything, but I don't think that the general masses of left or right Americans support a strike on Iran, or even necessarily are championing this new kind of expansionism that we're also seeing, this new kind of engagement, as we saw with Venezuela, or what we're increasingly hearing with the Don Roe Doctrine, securing the Western Hemisphere, but doing it in ways that kind of require military interventions, but not for defensive reasons per se. It's not like we're being attacked by Cuba or Venezuela or Greenland that necessarily is justifying these measures, and it doesn't seem like the population is supporting it. So, Jackson, do you think that that these sorts of things, whether wars far abroad on the other side of the world, like Iran, or even the expansion militarily, kidnapping leaders in American states, Latin American states or beyond, Do you think that this is to keep the dollar floating principally, or do you think it's to strategically secure things, or do you think it's something else even entirely, or maybe a variety of things at the same time?
I definitely think it's a variety of things. Can't pin it on one thing, but I mean, Wesley Clark did point out that Iran was the big enchilada of the what was it, 8 countries that they had listed out, and said that, well, there's this many countries that we want to target that don't have Rothschild controlled banks, for example. They're not on the Western money supply. And the Western money supply is what keeps the whole system afloat. It is. And very interesting, there's reports saying from, I don't know if it's true, but out of China today, saying Xi Jinping wants the yuan to act as a challenge against the dollar as a global reserve currency. But it'll be a fundamentally different sort of project, I guess, if and when that does happen, because you look at how they keep the dollar afloat, and it's, by force, cycling it through all these economies, either telling these local manufacturers that they have to accept to be paid in US dollar when they're exporting their goods to other countries. And then all those dollars get cycled up to the central banks and they get held in the countries. And then what do those countries do? They buy US Treasury bonds. So they're stuck with the Treasury bonds. And it's an endless cycle that keeps going and going. And Michael Hudson writes a lot about it. It took a Marxist to actually, get a solid understanding of how the U.S. dollar and how the U.S. economy operates. And that's why so much of Wall Street actually even reads him, because he had the best analysis of it. But I do think that's probably the primary point. Something that Karen Kwiatkowski said when she was on my show the last time that really stuck with me was, remember what they did when they went into Iraq. Immediately they go into Iraq and they say Saddam's oil, that's going back on the US dollar. When they went into Libya, they were working to create this Pan-African state and obviously alternative currency. And they said, no, that's not going to happen. And in Venezuela, I mean, I don't think anyone sincerely believes that in Venezuela there's going to be a mass infrastructure project and there's going to be some great uptick in the amount of oil production, because that didn't happen in Iraq. It didn't happen in Syria. But what they are going to do is make sure that China doesn't have the capability to come in there and do what they're doing all across the world, doing massive infrastructure deals. And in the case of Venezuela, it wouldn't be repaid in the form of, loans or something like that. It'd be repaid via oil shipments. So I think that's, their main fear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right now on the issue of, you brought up China's vast investments and interest in Latin America. Panama, the Panamanian government just ruled that it was unconstitutional for China to have its holdings, its influence in the ports on either side of the Panama Canal. There's obviously a lot of infrastructure that's been built up tied to the Belt and Road Initiative, which seems to be targeted by certain forces controlling U.S. foreign policy who believe that this needs to be completely expelled, cut off from Latin America and maybe the world more broadly. Right now, do you think that the Chinese have, or let me ask it this way. Let me keep it on the Don Rowe doctrine before I go into that. Do you think that the Chinese have enough sway currently to keep a lot of these countries stable in Latin America? There's rail lines between Bolivia, through Bolivia to Peru and Brazil. There's a way of doing things that the U.S. could benefit from if they work on reviving this idea of thinking long-term, thinking about win-win self-interest, like we used to do under John F. Kennedy. But and sometimes I see that, Trump will come out with a message saying how much he respects Xi Jinping, how much he respects Putin. He'll say these positive things, and it seems like there's motion towards some positive constructive dialogue, but then the opposite will tend to occur. And the U.S. will militarily intervene in a country that's doing business with China, and do you think that there is any chance right now that the U.S. might still find some common ground with China and Russia on economic development? As again, Kirill Dmitriev has said, he's very optimistic that there could be something on Arctic development, which ties into the Polar Silk Road and all of the vast resources in the Arctic that they could work on together? Or do you think that it's more, when people talk about regions of anywhere that's strategic, really, that it's more just to situate and prepare for an oncoming war against Russia and China, and there's nothing to work with inside of the U.S.?
Is that a question?
That's you, Karen. Yeah, Karen, that's to you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, the possibility of working together to improve global transportation and trade and all that exists. But the possibility for the people that call the shots in the United States around Trump and in DC and New York, the possibility for them to obscenely profit from that is small. So since it is small, look at the Venezuelan thing. That has been Lauder, I guess it is, or one of the guys. There's a wealthy multi-billionaire that has refineries that are specialized in this very thick, viscous oil that comes out of Venezuela. So, he's going to benefit from anything that's shipped from Venezuela. It'll all go there and he can process it. So if there's financial benefit to the people that run our government, then I think they will say, oh yeah, we can work together. But I think there's limited financial ability for them to profit in the way that they want to. And we had the Epstein files, so this big release, and there's been a lot of stuff that's popped up just from the people that are studying that closely, and a lot of it has to do with how can we, Epstein's friends and allies, which are the same people that run our government, okay, how can we get in ground floor, get into this angle or that angle? How can we profit obscenely? They don't use the word obscenely because that's not in their vocabulary. That is what they are, obscene. But how can we massively take advantage of turmoil, chaos, change, and get in here and make a ton of money, so that we can do whatever we do with it, which includes laundering it to pursue other interests. So the love of money of the people who run our government, this is a problem. They're not going to look for national. This is not JFK's America anymore. Yeah. Not at all.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I appreciate that, Karen. And yeah, I mean, it looks like we're in very stormy waters right now. Trump just made a little message on top of everything else going on. It seems like it doesn't seem like an executive order has been passed labeling Cuba as I forget the specific language that was used. I had written it down, but Trump had the following to say about Cuba.
Cuba? I don't know. The word choke off is awfully tough. Cuba is a failing nation, and you have to feel badly for Cuba. They've treated people very badly. We have a lot of Cuban Americans who really were treated very badly, and they'd probably like to go back. And no, I'm not trying to, but it looks like it's something that's just not going to be able to survive. I think Cuba will not be able to survive.
What's your opinion about the UK getting involved with China?
Thank you for your note very much.
Thank you. As you were thinking about that,
Cuba will not be able to survive. The executive order simply just labels Cuba as it declares a national emergency, or it declares over Cuba, its policy and its government. It's very ambiguous, but it also labels within that Russia as a malign state, and it calls for effectively choking off Cuba from energy and other vital necessities that it requires to keep its economy and its people alive and afloat. The Mexican government recently just said they will stop all oil deliveries to Cuba. Clearly not a sovereign decision from Mexico. There's a lot of pressure being put on a lot of states that seem to foretell an oncoming, whether complete repeat of what was done in Venezuela or maybe something that's slightly different. They've been trying to get Cuba now since 1959. Jackson, what do you think is going on here? Do you think that it's inevitable as well, or do you think that what do you think is behind this messaging?
Well, with the closure of Little St. James Island, it is apparent that they need a new place to do these sorts of rituals. And, previously at one point, it seems as though a lot of Americans did do those sorts of rituals in Cuba and those practices in Cuba. But look, I mean, the question has to be asked, to what end? So Mexico, Scheinbaum says that they're going to do the oil deliveries. She has this triumphant, speech and post, and she's doing her morning briefings. And then, as you pointed out, several days later, she says, actually, no. And this was totally a sovereign decision by Mexico. Yeah, right. What does Trump want to do with Cuba? I mean, Cuba, it's not like they're a major producing nation. They're not a major manufacturer. I mean, it's been discussed before that maybe they have some deposits off their coast or something like that. But why so much focus on it? I know Marco Rubio's been dreaming about it for a very long time, and many of the other gusanos in Miami have, and their goal would be to turn it back into what it was before Fidel and Che and the revolution. But it's like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do a Delta Force raid and take out Diaz-Canal? And then what? At least in Venezuela, they could fall back on Delcy Rodriguez and say, okay, well, Maduro put all these terms for a potential agreement forward. Now that we've got Maduro and we can claim victory, now let's move forward on the deal. What sort of deal can they fall back on that's going to be, lenient to the U.S. with Cuba? We don't do business with them. We don't do anything with them. It's like, do they want a Four Seasons there? Do they want they want pina coladas on the beaches of Havana? They want a Four Seasons. Maybe that's just what they want. I don't know, but it's like, it seems like a lot of focus. The truth is, though, Cuba is, in fact, I don't mean to be pessimistic, and you're not supposed to say these things, but Cuba is a very unfortunate situation right now. Obviously, it's due to the sanctions, the embargo. It's due to a lot of things. Maybe in decades past, you could point to other mistakes that were made by Cuban leadership. Of course, there are mistakes you can point to, big mistakes, I think, that you can point to. But I just don't understand. They're already suffering. I went there a few years ago. I'm not even kidding. You look out at some directions in the skyline, if you're up high enough in the city, and it's all crumbling. The buildings are all crumbling, and it looks like, I don't mean to be hyperbolic. It looks like Gaza in some places. Like, everything is just like falling apart. There's no roofs anywhere. It's crazy. Something needs to be done. Sanctioning them, embargoing them further is only going to make the problem worse.
Mm-hmm. Same question, Karen, on the question of Cuba. What do you think?
I was thinking Gaza too, in terms of what we're trying to do to them, because it is impoverished from all the years and whatever of past sanctions and the whole way that we've treated them, and their own decisions too, of course. But people they see Gaza as a place of new Cuba, and instead of new Gaza, like Jared Kushner shared with everybody, I think the new Gaza is actually probably, the new Cuba would probably be, you could just take the slideshow and put it there, and then I could see very much how the United States would want that, because it's closer to home, and it's something a lot of Trump's friends and allies and supporters, including his Israeli supporters, would be able to jump in there and rebuild it. And so before you rebuild, you have to raise it. You have to, clear the ground, and you have to get the people under control, what's left of the people. And so what Israel is doing to Gaza, and of course what the United States is doing to Gaza, is kind of a public experiment. And it worked really well, because people got mad, but none of the policy leaders did anything to stop it, and have not to date done anything to stop it. In fact, they all seek to profit from the erasure of Gazans. And if we could erase Cubans, because I'm sure that, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that the attitude of Cuban Americans like Rubio is, if you didn't leave Cuba a long time ago, you don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's their attitude. So I don't think we care one whit about how bad it is for Cubans. And also, we're depriving them of energy, which drives everything else. So yeah, I think we would like to see them disappeared and have an island, a good-sized island with a lot of potential to please the elites in Washington, and to enrich the friends of the Trump administration. And that's Republican and Democratic friends alike, right? It's not like this is just Republicans. I mean, it's the wealthy class that sees states and governments as their tool. So yeah, I could definitely see that happening. And I can see Trump spinning it very positively. You know, he keeps talking about who wants to be the 51st state. I would see Cuba as being the first one that they could actually do that to. Not Alberta, not Canada, not Greenland, but Cuba. And that's a huge success. You know, Trump likes to be, he wants to go down in history. He wants his legacy to be these massive, big, gold-plated things. Bringing Cuba into the United States as a beneficiary, possibly a state, a territory. We have the control of that. Rebuilding it would go down in history is a big deal. You know, I mean, not a positive thing necessarily, because I think most Cubans would have to leave or be killed. I mean, you know, this Gaza model. You talk about your devilish influences. What the world has allowed, what the Western world certainly has allowed to happen in Gaza, that's not a bad mistake in their view. This is what we can get away with. This is what we can do. And this is what we will do if it is profitable. And you can see from Kushner's vision, and that is Trump's vision as well, of Gaza. There are no Palestinians there. There are no Gazans there unless they're cleaning the streets. This is a takeover. So I see that model working very well in Cuba. I mean, it won't be sold like that. You know, they'll have nice words that they put around it, but yeah, they want it. And again, coveting something, you know, wanting something, it does motivate people, right? I think the people in Washington want things, and there's no logic beyond that. I want that thing. I will have that thing. And that's our foreign policy in a nutshell.
Yeah, it is extremely primitive and simplistic, and sometimes we overlook the some of these more fundamental, disgusting drives that lead to such sophisticated systems being built up. Not to say that that's the sole motive factor, but that's a driving factor is an important one as well. But that also brings in the question of Ukraine, and you brought up Gaza, Ukraine. There's certain similarities as well, on top of what you brought up regarding a slower kill, a slower burn with Cuba that's been going on for decades of economic warfare, destroying the capacity to sustain themselves and just, you know, accelerate the slow atrophy, as you pointed out, Jackson. But then again, you got Palestine's also been a slow burn, but that accelerated. They obviously jacked up the heat on that over the past few years. Ukraine, slow burn since the 90s. Economic sort of just terrorism by the IMF to choke them off of having a productive economy. But that accelerated after 2014, and especially accelerated again with the increase of heat that just is creating ashes where there once was civilization. And it seems like there's a common policy or common pattern with some of the ideas being proposed by Kushner and others around the Gaza, you know, Peace Council, and what the vision would be to rebuild that zone. And we've heard similar conversations from think tanks and what have you over the BlackRock designs for the rebuilding of Ukraine. Can you say anything about what you see as similar motives, similar designs, or formulas applied to these various cases, and what they want to create in your mind?
I think it's just a sincere effort by finance capital, primarily based in the United States and Wall Street and City of London, to go in to any country that they can get their hands on, any territory. And again, to bring it back to Venezuela, not necessarily, there's always this trope that's been echoed on the left about every single war. And everyone on the left says, oh, you know, they're doing it to, you know, steal all of their oil. I have to point back to the fact that in Iraq, there's been no massive increase in oil production. That's just a fact. And it runs in direct contradiction with what so many people are saying and looking at the surface. And you got to ask the question, if it's not Shell that's making the heaps and heaps of money, someone's making heaps and heaps of money. Shell and these Chevron, okay, yeah, they're making money. But who's making the real money that is a driving force behind all of these crazy wars and all this loss of life and suffering, both American and obviously in the countries that we target. And really, it's finance capital. It's the banks. It's Wall Street. It's the Rothschilds. It's Wells Fargo. It's Chase Manhattan. It's all these groups and more. BlackRock, as you mentioned, who get to go in and asset strip all these countries, go into countries that have state-owned enterprise, break it down, sell it for parts. Those are the real winners. It's if we could industrialize Venezuela's oil sector, or we could create a mining behemoth out of Ukraine, don't you think our country would be in better order? Don't you think Trump would have been able to, or someone would have been able to fix our infrastructure in the United States? We can't do anything. China is the only country on the face of the earth who's able to really do anything. That's why they control 98% of the refining capabilities for rare earth minerals. And in that simple fact, they really do possess the reins for the future.
Yeah, that's a great irony, at the end of the day. And you're absolutely right. It all comes down to, I think, how we define value. Like what is it that we think of as value? And Karen, you listed, when we opened up today's conversation, a whole number of ways that have been plaguing our society in terms of thinking that value is caused by stealing, usury, speculating, printing it out of nothing, right? There's all sorts of ways to create money, but does money have value because it's money and because people want it? Or is it something else that gives it value that is tied to what are you building for the next generation? It seems like at our better times long past, we touched upon, we were entertaining that more enlightened idea of value, but those moments were very short-lived. In China, as Jackson pointed out, it seems like there's a more deep-rooted understanding that you can't simply steal to create value. You have to build something that will stimulate and create more economic opportunities and lift people out of poverty so that they will be better business partners. If they're not struggling in scarcity moment to moment, they will be better customers. They will buy more of your stuff. They'll produce more things that you can buy. It's if you're not at war, if your neighbors aren't in a civil war or in civil conflict, or if you're not going to war with them, they will trust you more, and they will want to do longer term business deals with you. That seems like common sense. So, it's painful to see the stark difference of thinking here, but it does seem like we will get a new system, a new economic architecture coming online. It doesn't seem like it's possible to kick this can, some people say it's going to be a hyperinflationary process that's going to be triggered. Maybe it'll be something more deleveraged. Maybe it'll be something that looks more like the Great Depression, with defaults that just, get out of control at some point. But it does seem like there's a fight over who's going to control the architecture of what value will be and what the operating system is going to look like and who will it serve that will emerge out of the coming storm. But it doesn't seem like everybody's in agreement. So do you think that there's necessarily going to be that it's possible that there's going to be because China, there's similarities. China's talking about digital currencies, but they're also building things. We're talking about digital currencies, but we're not. We're just stealing things. What do you think that the system is going to look like coming online more and more? And do you think that it's completely underdetermined?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the new system is going to look like, but I know that what it seems to me is American foreign policy, this grabbing of everything, and taking Iraq oil but not developing it, not producing, taking Venezuelan oil, and how much was that advertised to be? And of course, immediately we realized, wait a minute, you can't get it out. It's not cost effective to get it out, and plus, it's not what they thought it was. So, but it's all about trying to prop up the dollar, not necessarily with productivity, because as you said, we don't have the capability to make really productive things. We can't even make, our weapon systems are decades out of touch with the current technologies. And we can't even, we had a hypersonic missile programs, both in the Air Force and the Army, both got canceled because we couldn't even make the preliminary stuff work. Whereas other countries have been able to do that. Other countries, specifically, China, Russia, but even India. So we can't build anymore. What we can do is print money. And we can't keep printing money unless we have an asset base that we call American. So you take what was advertised as the biggest oil reserves in the planet at one time prior to going into Venezuela. What were we talking about? Biggest oil reserves. Well, that's bank language. That's borrowing language. That's what Trump does understand, because he is a completely leveraged guy. His whole entire career has been a career of leverage. He can sell a project, just like Jared Kushner is selling this new Gaza project. Doesn't exist. It's fantasy. But if I can sell it, I can get investors. Later, I can screw them over. That's fine. That's reality, right? Some people take risks, you lose. But we're playing that game with the U.S. dollar because we don't produce anything. And it's not just that we aren't producing anything that's of value. We don't have the demographics. We don't have the educated population. We don't have people with time to do anything other than hand to mouth, pretty much. That is I would say the bottom 70% of the economy is living paycheck to paycheck. So when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're working 2 jobs, you're worried about the one that's going to lay you off first. You are not creating. You are not in a position to innovate. Okay. So who's doing the innovation? What, the billionaires? I mean, China's DeepSeek AI is out innovating American AI by the moment. So we're not even able to think in things that we're supposed to be the leaders in: military technology, artificial intelligence. We're not innovating there. So we have nothing but what we can say we can own and offer as collateral for more printing. And so, yeah, it's coming very close to the end of the end. And I think the digital currency, the stable coin, tying it to the dollar, that's the end result, because that will allow, I think, for some of the wealthy to cope with a collapse of the dollar. We can then say what the dollar is worth to Americans. We can screw them over, because Americans will be screwed. That is, end of empire does that to whoever is still clinging to the empire. Whoever's inside the empire's borders, we're going to get the shaft. And it will hurt. But if we can control it with federal police, with a digital currency that we can monitor behavior, and a surveillance state. I will say we do good on surveillance technology. Between us and Israel, we've got surveillance technology down, and that's going to be important for the transition that I think the people that know what's happening in Washington and hope to benefit from it, they see that's coming. So I think the territory we're claiming, not to produce because we don't know how to produce, but it's to borrow. It's to extend the life of the dollar for a little bit longer. I think it's extremely dangerous. And I think war fits into this. This is why, back to that initial question of war with Iran or war with somebody else, it fits in, because war allows countries to blow their constitutions out of the water, to control everything domestically. And that is what will have to happen if this country wants to get through the collapse of the dollar and come out intact on the other side. It's not going to do that. U.S. is going to break up a lot of different pieces. But the hope of the people that are in power now is that, oh no, we can manage it. It's manageable. It's not manageable, but war will actually assist with this. So that's why I'm really not positive on hardly anything.
Well, it's good to keep a realistic mindset. I mean, we'll have to hope for the best, but again, prepare for the worst. And ignoring those worst case scenarios is irresponsible, to say the least. In the issue of I guess to end today's, we're reaching the top of the hour. So Jackson, I'm going to throw the last one at you. And I just to throw out my own thoughts here based on what you just said, Karen. It would be so easy. I was thinking about how I was having a conversation with a friend, and Trump announced this new policy where every newborn baby is going to receive $1,000 investment package in order to be so that their parents can invest and get this kid ready, from the cradle to become a capitalist. And in hindsight, part of me is thinking that could be feasibly in an enlightened society a good idea, and that could almost serve. That's a lot of money that you could create, and if you could sort of harmonize where the investments are going to go, maybe you could use that almost like a national bank as a sort of deposit of equity of capital to be able to invest in building up the type of thing that we used to do, infrastructure, whatever else we need for a national mission to give us purpose again. And that could be one of many ways of creating a pseudo-national banking type of fund or mechanism, or a sovereign wealth fund that would be tied to doing things. But who's going to control where those funds go? It's not actually the parents. It's something else, some other mechanism. And is it going to go towards like investing in Palantir as part of like building up an AI surveillance state? Is that where the funds are going to be going? It doesn't. It might, it shouldn't, but it would be so easy to have a national bank to take the best lessons of what we did when we had a Hamiltonian banking system, or its analogs under Lincoln or under Roosevelt, using the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to invest in building up the New Deal. Like, those are things we used to do when we forgot how to do it. China's doing it. That's why that's how they use their national banks, is they provide capital, they emit credit for projects, and that can be held accountable, that can hold accountable authorities and businesses. Are they doing the job, or are they not? If they're not, you can make an intervention. You could do a corrective. In the West, we have no goals. We have nothing like that. But the goals that we do have are all war-oriented. That's the one place where we are allowed to have goals, is when it comes to destroying value. It kills me. But that on the question then, I use the word it kills me, and I was being figurative, but maybe not there. The START treaty is expiring in a few days. This is something which was seen by many as a great hope 20 years ago, as being something that would help to phase out nuclear warheads, get rid of the threat of nuclear war. But now it's expiring on February 5th. It seems like this is only going to accelerate a massive expansion of nuclear weapons development, unless cooler heads prevail, unless Kirill Dmitriev has secrets that he's not telling us about, better common sense agreements for collaboration on nuclear power in space and Arctic that he throws out there. I don't know if he's telling the truth. I don't know if that's real. But do you think that right now, what do you think is going to come? I'll leave this at the last question. What do you think is going to come out of this START treaty expiring? Do you think that there's something else, like a better START treaty being discussed? Or do you think that we are just going to full on accelerate towards a new kind of unrestricted, something worse than even the mutual assured destruction policy was during the Cold War? Do you think this is going to be even worse than that? And could this lead towards a global calamity? Or do you think saner heads are working behind the scenes, like Alex Craner or others have postulated?
Well, it's supposed to expire in like 3 days, so we don't have much time.
Yeah.
But personally, maybe my opinion on this is controversial. I think that arms control, I think that being a non-aligned state, I think all these sorts of ideas have come and gone and proven to be extremely ineffective if the goal is to maintain stability and maintain safety for your sovereignty. Why is Russia, who has many nuclear weapons, unveiling the Budavestnik, the Poseidon, the this, the that, the third, all these other weapons that they are even more powerful that they haven't unveiled yet? It's because, that is a strategic deterrent. Why is Israel so committed to bombing Iran before they possibly get the Su-35s that we know are supposed to be coming, before they maybe do decide to get a nuclear weapon? Maybe they already have one. Who knows? But I think former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, and he's on the National Security Council. I think he's a deputy chairman of the National Security Council in Russia. He did an interview this week, and he said, if it START treaty, if it comes to a close and we the sun sets on that era of history, the nuclear club will continue to expand. He said, that is the best guarantee that you could possibly have for any state in the world to safeguard your sovereignty. And North Korea is a shining example of that. I think Iran could be a shining example of that. Israel is technically even a shining example of that as well. Pakistan isn't going to launch a nuke at Israel because they know what's going to come right back at them. Even though maybe there's a lot of people in Pakistan that might want that. So I think that it's not as much of a bad thing. I think that we're moving into a new era, and Trump is definitely defining that era for Western leaders and how we'll move forward. And I think it's actually a good thing. I think that give Burkina Faso a nuke, give them all a nuke. I think that's what we need.
Well, they say, well-armed citizenry is a great way to avoid tyranny. So maybe expanding that to the international scope, the logic still potentially holds. Maybe without the Samson doctrine. I think you make some sense. So guys, now I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom, and it's been sobering, but appreciated. We shouldn't be drunk at a time of crisis anyway, so sobriety is good. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jackson. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Until in 2 weeks' time, we'll do this all over again. Take care.
Thanks.